Alright guys, now I hope you're all good. Now in this video I'm going to show you how I've set up the Lumix S5iiX to be the ultimate hybrid camera. Let's go. Right, what you need to do first is turn this dial to movie mode and you can make all your changes and save it to a custom setting later. So here's what I have for my video settings. If we go into the menu, first option there is exposure mode. You want to make sure that that is set to manual. Then photo style, I've chosen Vlog to get the best dynamic range. Metering mode, I've gone with the top one, which is like evaluative or multimeter, which is going to basically analyze the entire area. Dual native ISO, I'm set this to auto because I'm never really in a situation where I'm in low or high environments, and if I am, I'll probably change this later, but for the most time I'm going to change that to auto, so it will just automatically choose from the full range of the ISO. So the next thing is synchro scan. Make sure that that's switched on, and I'll explain that just a second. Then we want to go down to the next tab, which is image quality 2. Then for the SS gain operation, this is quite important. You want to change this from, because I think it actually is by default sec ISO, which basically means it's going to be shutter speed and ISO, but you actually want it on shutter angle and ISO. That will allow you to have a proper shutter angle of 180 degrees, which comes in really handy later on, and I'll explain why. And if we go back up to image quality 1, that synchro scan then will allow you to change the shutter angle in 1 degree increments. Otherwise it changes it in like 5 or 10 degree increments, which isn't handy at all. Then if we go to image format 1, here's quite important. You want to change this because by default it's actually on MP4, which gives you less frame rates and options to choose from in video mode. So if I put that on MP4, I'll show you what I mean. So if you go to the recording quality, you'll see that there's literally 5 options available to you. If you go back, put that to MOV. Yes. Now you'll see that there's like pages and pages of options. So you want to make sure that that is actually selected. Image area of video, that's full frame or APS-C, pixel to pixel. Full frame for the majority of the time. It will actually change to crop when it needs to. Record quality, for this instance, I'm just going to choose 4K 25p, 422, 10-bit, long op because I don't have very expensive memory cards and I don't want to deal with the massive file sizes of all iIntra. So a really handy thing to do here, which will actually come in handy later and I'll show you what I mean, is in the record quality my list, you can actually take some of these options here because there's so many and you're not going to use them all. Quite a lot of them are pretty much redundant if you shoot certain frame rates or certain options all the time. You're not going to want to scale through that list every time. So what you can do, for example, is if I go to the top, 6K, 25p, 420, 10-bit, whatever it is, you can actually press the Q, which will add it to the list. As you can see, I've already added it to my list. So if you just go down those, if you do it in order as well as to what you're going to use the most, because it actually saves them in the order that you saved them. For example, if I go to my list, you'll see that I've got 5 options there. So I've got 4K 25 frames per second, 4K 50 frames per second, full HD 100 frames per second, then I've got 3.3K 4:3 ratio, 6K open gate, and then I've got full HD 50 frames per second just in case I want that without a crop. So those are my recording quality lists, and I'll get to why that's quite important later on. I don't bother with proxies, timecode, not interested, not bothered with that either. Focus, we want autofocus on. Detect subject, I've gone for human and I've gone for the whole body rather than the eye because apparently that's better, but you can change these later. It's very handy having this button up here on the Lumix cameras. You can change these really easily. Autofocus custom settings, you're going to want to have this on unless you're not bothered and you just want to have the default settings, but I've set mine and I've put it to speed -2 and sensitivity +1. So that means it's probably going to focus slowly. So it's going to give me a better focus pull, but the sensitivity and the reactiveness of the camera is going to be a little bit faster at +1. Still working on those, it's not perfect. So next, continuous autofocus mode 2, that's where I've got it set to, which means that it will just work all the time, whereas mode 1 will only work when you're recording, whereas I want it when I'm not recording as well, so it actually pulls focus and I can see what's in before I press the shutter. Autofocus assist light, I don't have that on. Peaking, I have that on. Again, you can set it to whatever you want. I've done it to +2 just because I want a bit more showing on the screen. Next, we're going to go to the audio recording. And obviously I want that on because I want to be able to see the levels on. Then if we go to sound recording level adjust, I have this on the lowest just because I prefer to use the gain on the microphones that I'm using, which is either the Rode or something else. If it doesn't have its own gain on the microphone, then I'll probably put that to -12. Everything else I just leave on default. So then if we go to others, Image stabilizer. Now I tend to change this on the fly and I just have the dual IS, which is the built-in IBIS of this and the IBIS of the lens as well, having working together. I don't like to use the E-stabilization that much because I do find that it jerks and it moves whenever I'm panning and stuff. So I only use that in certain situations and I apply that to a function button later. Same with Boost IS. Very rarely use that unless I really need a tripod shot. And then that's it for that section. Then if we go to the settings cog, here, I want to go to ISO increments, change that to a third, so it changes every third value. Extended ISO on, because sometimes I like to drift below and above. Then face priority in multimetering. I like to keep that on because quite a lot of the time I'm focusing on subjects and things like that with people. And I think that's it for that page. So next, if we go to focus and shutter and go down to AF, AE, lock hold, I like to have that switched on. I've also got it assigned to a custom button. That means that essentially I can lock my focus, I can lock my exposure just by the press of a button, so nothing drifts and nothing moves. This feature is really handy. It's autofocus and manual focus on. For example, at the moment I've got it on autofocus. As you can see, it's focusing on the lens in front, but I can actually just turn the focus ring and override the focusing on the fly, which is really handy to do. Then if we go to MF guide, that's really handy to have on as well. So if you click on that, I like to set it to meters because I'm from the UK and don't understand feet. But essentially, if we go back to the screen, you'll see that when I focus, you can see it tells me the distance on the screen over here of where I'm focusing and how far away I am. Next, we have focus ring lock. I have that off. And if we go down, shutter autofocus, I have that switched on, which means that if I half press the shutter, it will start autofocusing even in video. Human eye detection display on, so that shows all the crosshairs and things like that on the face and the eye. Half press shutter off, definitely want to have that off. Otherwise, if you half press the shutter, it'll just start recording, which is just a bit of a nightmare. So do not like that, turn that off. However, I do like to have the assign record button to the shutter button as well. So I do have the option to start recording using the shutter button as well as the red button on the top. Next, we have the operation menu, and I can dive into the Q menu settings, but I mean, do you really want to know? I mean, if we go into that, I've put it in mode 1, which is just a layout option. So if we go to video, you'll see what I've got here. So I've got exposure mode as my first one, then I've got my recording quality list there. Dual ISO setting, some of this we won't have covered just yet. Photo style, which is like vlog and stuff like that. Wave and vector forms, focus peaking, then I can do my sound adjustment levels, E-stabilization, boost stabilization, live cropping, metering mode, and focus transition. So that's what I've got there in case you're interested, but these are all customizable. You can do whatever you want there. So I'm going to show you how I've set up my function button. So if we go into that, you want to go into the recording mode because that's going to change the settings while you're recording anything. I never change any of the default buttons because I find that Panasonic has like got it nailed. So you've got white balance, you've got ISO, you've got exposure compensation, you've just got everything where you need it. And especially this button here, which is just assigned for all your autofocusing functions. It's just really handy, really well laid out. Panasonic have definitely got the best layout when it comes to cameras, in my opinion. So it allows me to customize everything else so much better and add features that I probably couldn't add with things like a Sony or a Nikon or something like that. So what I've done is the first custom button available to change that isn't preset is this back arrow here. So I've changed that to auto white balance lock because I quite like to shoot in auto white balance on the fly. And if you can lock your white balance while you're recording, that's very handy as well. Let's go to the next page. I really do not change any of these here because I don't ever swipe on my screen. So I don't ever use that, find it a bit redundant, but it doesn't matter. And on the front, next to the lens, there's another function button there called FN2. Now I've set this to autofocus lock and auto exposure lock. So when I press that, it will lock the exposure and it will lock the focus where it was and where it is at that moment in time, which on the fly, you're recording somebody, that's really useful. So we go to the next page. So this scroll wheel is really handy because I've got it set to my ISO, so I'm constantly using it. So allowing me to have 4 extra custom buttons. So for example, at the top, I've got that set to E-stabilization, so I can expand my stabilization when I want on the fly. On the left, I've got that set to my record audio levels. On the bottom, boost IS. So this is my biggest tip when it comes to this camera, and that's assigning a custom button. Doesn't matter which one you do, but I've assigned this one here to be my recording options list, which if I click on that, it brings up all my record options that I've saved previously, and then I can instantly just change into 4K 50. Boom, changed. We're shooting in shutter angle, so nothing else needs to be changed. All those settings are identical as they were before. I don't need to change the dial and go into another mode. It's all done for me. I can do it again, click on it, go into full HD, 100 frames per second. I can click it again. We're now in 6K open gate. It's absolutely brilliant, and that is the biggest tip I would give you guys for this camera to make it a true hybrid camera. So if I go back to 4K 25, that then allows me to have custom buttons up here that I can assign to other things. So I've assigned custom mode 2 to my photography for like aperture priority, custom mode 3 to photography again, manual mode. So that means all I need to do now is just switch there and I'm in photo mode. Switch back, I'm in video mode. Change the frame rate there, boom. Not messing about with shutter speed, anything like that. White balance all stays the same. Everything stays the same. Absolutely fantastic. Game changing is that. Absolutely love it. So that's what I've got set up in my function buttons. You can copy them yourself, but at least it gives you the idea of how to set them up. And then if we go to dial set, this here is the control dial, which is basically this wheel here. So I've got that set to ISO, which I mentioned before. So that just means that I've got ISO, I've got my aperture and my shutter speed. So it's all easy and pretty much DSLR days. Then if we go to the next page, joystick setting, I've got this to defocus movement, which basically means that this little joystick here will adjust the focusing on the screen, so you can move it about like that. Find that really handy to have. Now if we go down to monitor and display, but we want to go to the video monitor and display, which is the fifth one, sorry, down. There we are. Vlog assist, obviously you want this on if you're shooting in Vlog. Frame markers, I don't tend to have these on because I've got the sort of like grid on, which basically shows me when I'm shooting 9x16 or 16x9, whatever that is, the portrait mode for reels and stuff. So I don't really have that on, but if you do want that on, you can turn that on. Basically it means that you can change this. So if I change it to 9x16, for example, then it kind of creates this box and then you know that everything's framed correctly for a 9x16, but I don't really like to have it on. Zebra pattern or zebra pattern to you Americans. I have that on zebra pattern 2. I don't really know what the settings are for this. I think 95%. Yeah, I've got it on 95%. Vector scope and waveform, I've got that assigned to a custom button, so I don't really have it on all the time. Now this is very important. Red record frame indicator. That basically means that when you start recording, it shows a big red box around the screen, which makes it obvious that you're recording. So that's very handy to have on. Let's go down. Now we're on lens and others. Focus ring control, I've left that on linear. I did actually set it so it's a little bit of a less focus throw. So it's put on 150 degrees, but you can play about with that and mess about with the focusing yourself. I like to have the lens information confirmation on. That basically means that when I zoom in and out, it tells me what focal length I'm at. Then if we move down to the spanner, go to the top, go to the monitor display. Now the eye sensor, basically the eye sensor is this bit here, which when you put your eye close to this, it allows you to see through the viewfinder and the screen turns off. Got the sensitivity down to low, but I actually have it on monitor most of the time. So when you're on there, if I hover in front of that, it's not actually going to turn on the viewfinder and turn off the screen because I find it very annoying. It's very weird. But if you can just click on this and change it, so now you should be able to see through the viewfinder and back to the screen. So I like to just have that button. So I think that's it. That's how I have my camera set up for video. So what you want to do is actually save these settings because it will automatically save them to the camera. Also guys, before you save your custom mode, make sure that you set your shutter angle, your ISO, aperture, white balance, all those things that you want to be your desired default when you switch into these modes, because otherwise, whatever you've just had it on at the moment will come up when you turn that dial. So make sure you've got those set before you actually save your custom settings. That's the same with photography as well, with the photo modes. Make sure you've got the correct shutter speed, ISO, and aperture that you want when you turn that dial on. So you need to go to the cog, which is like the sixth one down on the spanner. Go to save custom mode. I've already saved all mine, so I won't actually change it. But if I go into that, there's a button here that says display to edit the titles. So if you press the display button, you can actually change the titles and make them whatever you want. So I've obviously labeled mine 4K, as you can see, 4K 25 frames per second. So I know that the custom mode 1 is set to that. Custom mode 2 is aperture priority in photo. Custom mode 3 is photo but manual. Then I've got 2, 3 and 4, which is like my 3K and my 6K open gate. Not set custom mode 4 because I've got this super little button here that I use now to change all my frame rates, so there's no need. So it just opens it up, makes it a true hybrid camera. Absolutely love it. Fantastic. Now I'm going to show you my photo settings, which is a little bit more annoying to set up, but you've got to make sure that you put it in the correct shooting mode. So for example, I shoot in aperture priority a lot of the time. So if I put it in aperture priority, and then to make this easier, I'm actually going to load my custom settings because I can't remember everything. So if I load my actual custom settings for that, should bring them up, or it should allow me to see them all. I'm going to show you my photo settings. So if we start at the very top, I just keep the photo style in natural, but I shoot in RAW, so it doesn't really matter. Metering mode, again, I keep it in evaluative or whatever, multimeter. Aspect ratio, 3:2. Picture quality, RAW. I don't bother with JPEGs because I just don't see the point. So I'm just going to briefly go over all this. Don't bother with much of that. High dynamic range, I don't bother with that. None of these. Obviously my subject focus detection, I use this all the time, but I tend to keep it on human and face. Still keep peaking on. I keep it very similar to what I do for video really. Flash, I own a flash, so I don't bother messing with that. Bracketing I've got switched off, but I do have a custom button which I'll show you. Same with silent mode, I have that switched off because I like to use mechanical. Image stabilization, again very similar to what I have for video. Then if we go down to the settings, again very similar to what I have for video. I've got the increments set to 1/3, extended ISO on, auto white balance I don't bother because I show it in RAW, so I can just change the white balance. Do have face priority multimetering on again. Again, I have my autofocus, auto exposure lock. I've set it to the same button, so it's the same for video and for photo. Manual focus guide, still got that set to meters so I can see what distance I'm focusing on. Again, all very similar to what I've got for video. Shutter AF, obviously have that on. Human eye detection display, I've got that switched on as well. Half press shutter, you definitely want that off because otherwise when you half press it, it won't just focus, it'll also take a shot. You do not want that. Very irritating, don't know why they have it on. Same thing with my eye sensor, tend to have that off. Q menu, now that's slightly different to what I've got for video. I'll quickly show you what I've got. Metering mode, bracketing, silent mode. Then I've got shutter type. Then I've got night mode, noise reduction for long exposure. Then I've got minimum shutter speed if I don't want the camera to choose a shutter speed too low for like moving subjects and such. Autofocus detection settings, got that there. Custom settings for photo. Then I've got level gauge if I want to turn that on and off because it sometimes gets in the way. Aspect ratio and flash just in case I buy a flash. Function buttons, I'll go through what I've got for that. Again, I don't change any of the default ones because they're fantastic. This function button here is set to the drive mode setting. Then I've also got the autofocus and auto exposure lock to the front, which I had before. Don't even bother changing those because there's just no point. Next on the dial here, I've got silent mode assigned to the top. Then I've got bracketing assigned to the right. And then at the bottom, I've got metering mode. And then on the left, I can turn the level gauge on and off. Let me know in the comments if you think of any way to set this up better for photo or for video. I mean, I don't mind. This is just how I've managed to set it. Again, dial set, I've changed this to ISO. Joystick, definitely want that on so I can move the focusing box around. All right, guys, Editor Sam here. Of course, I forgot a couple of things. Goes without saying. Anyway, first one is constant preview. You're definitely going to want to have this switched on, especially in photo mode. Don't even think it works in video mode because I tried it and I don't think it works, but in photo mode, definitely have constant preview switched on. What this does is it allows you to see your exposure live on the screen as you change the aperture, your ISO and your shutter speed. So it allows you to see those effects live on the screen so you know whether or not you're getting an exposed image. It also shows you the depth of field and also the blurriness of the shutter speed. So it's very, very, very handy to have on. If you don't have it switched on, then all it does is show you a perfectly exposed image. You have no idea whether or not it's exposed. You take your shot, it's dark, it's light, you have no idea why. So yeah, make sure that's switched on. Second thing is histogram. Now you may have noticed that I've shown the histogram on every single image. I've not mentioned it, and that's because I'm an idiot. But anyway, histogram, that's just another exposure tool that I like to have switched on, especially when you're shooting in log, because obviously log comes out quite flat. So you can't really tell whether or not it's exposed, even with the Rec 709 conversion low over the top and the Vlog assist. You can't really tell sometimes. So it's definitely handy to have that on as well. I think that's it. I think I've remembered everything now. So annoying. Anyway, back to the video. I think pretty much it really. I've got my photo grid line, which I didn't mention before, but I like to have that on so I can see the rule of thirds. Always have that on really. I never shoot without it. I think that's it really. And again, once you've set this up, you want to go to your spanner, 6-1 down, save custom mode, and then I'll save that to C2. So that's how I've got my camera set up for a true hybrid experience. So now we've got it in video mode, at the flick of a switch, we're in aperture priority for photos, amazeballs. Then we can go into manual mode if we don't want aperture priority. And then we can just go back to our video mode and change the frame rates on the fly. I mean, that is amazing. I absolutely love the Panasonic cameras. I think they're just so much better than other systems. So yeah, that's how I've got my camera set up. So that's it. That's how I've set up the Lumix S5iiX to be what I believe are the best settings for hybrid shooting. What do you think? Do you agree? If you do, let us know in the comments below. Do you disagree? Have I missed something? Is there a better way of doing things? Share the knowledge below, because that's what the Creators Block is all about. Sharing our knowledge for the love of photography, videography, and all things content creation. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider giving it a thumbs up. It really helps out the channel. Consider subscribing if you want to see more videos like this. Hit the bell, all those nice things that will put a smile on my face. And I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.
I know you heard a little something about me, right? People love to talk, everybody wanna doubt me, right? I know bunch of fakes all around me, right? They clown